Hello, my name is Kevin Chang, and I'm a volunteer with the Happy Fest Committee. I'll be the moderator for the panel regarding our home here. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. My name is Jack Merlio. I'm also a volunteer with OCA, and I'm going to be moderating the panel with the director and co-producer of Ghost Mountain.
Remember, if you have any questions for our guests, please comment in the YouTube comment section and we will answer them live. Any questions we don't get to will be forwarded to the filmmakers. I'd like to start off by giving a warm welcome to the director of our home here, Angela Chen, joining us from Austin.
Hi.
Hello, it's a pleasure to have you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I understood you drew from some personal experiences in creating this film. Can you elaborate on what those were and how they affected the movie?
I think I just froze.
Okay,
I'm okay now. This story is based on something that had happened to my brother and I when we were in Austin about a little over 10 years ago. So it was an experience that we had at a fast food drive-through, and that experience led to me wanting to understand more of why that had happened the way it did. And also the Celine, the character who works at the fast food joint, is also based off of my mother at the time. While I was in grad school, I was making this for a thesis film. My mother would be calling, and she had been estranged and had gone back to Taiwan, and she was making
you froze again for the last few seconds. You mentioned your mom went back to Taiwan. And then
she had gone back to Taiwan. She had gone back to Taiwan when I was really young, and she wanted to come back and build our family back up, even though we're all grown children and mostly in our 20s and 30s. And she wanted to buy a house for us to live together again. So it really broke my heart with both of these weighing heavily on me at the time. So that catapulted me into writing this.
Did going through that writing process help you sort of like was it difficult to go through that writing process, having it be so heavily influenced by personal experience?
Yes, it was very difficult, but it was also something that forced me to reconcile with kind of the trauma that had happened from it, more from my
You froze again.
Oh no. I hope this is still enjoyable for anybody watching. I'm sorry about that. What was I saying? I was talking about, my brother and I were estranged for about 8 years, and we hadn't spoken to each other. And when I decided I wanted to really honor his side of both sides of the story and all sides of the story, but give him the time and space to also have a platform and to do this, I called him and didn't expect him to answer. So it began a whole new opening of the way we are able to come back together and rebuild the family. So it was a difficult process in terms of also trying to I think I froze.
Yeah.
I can tell when I freeze because my screen turns black. I was saying that, what was I saying? Sorry, this freezing stuff gets me out of
your train of thought. Yeah.
I was saying that I forgot what I said.
You're trying to.
I was trying to. Okay, I remember. So it's because so many people were telling me that the story needs to be based off of the character that revolves around the character that's based off of me, but it never felt right. And I never wanted it to be a story about what I went through. I wanted it to be an experience what we went through and what my brother went through.
So it sounds like that's kind of what...
It was very difficult. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
I
thought
think
you.
I'm lagging.
Yeah, there's just a slight lag. So it sounds like that kind of influenced your decision to try to tell this story from multiple perspectives. How much of a challenge was it trying to accomplish that in short?
It's very challenging. It's challenging to do it in one perspective, and then we have a two-hander with my brother's character and Rose and Dylan, and then Celine. And I originally had Sean's perspective, the guy who attacks the car as well, but we ended up cutting him out. I think most of the team and a lot of our faculty members and advisors had strongly recommended or suggested that I cut out the other storyline. So that was a difficult thing of how much do I fight for that when everybody and for me as a filmmaker, since I froze. For for me as a filmmaker, I am very passionate about being able to understand a worldview through another perspective. So that was important for me to bring in these other views where we are living in the same world but experience things so differently, but also there's a strong parallel core to the pain and I see there's a comment. Should we go through those?
Yeah. Well, we have a question from audience.
Okay.
Justin asks, "Such a powerful film. I was wondering what was behind the decision to make Celine not Asian like your mom."
So growing up in Texas, we are constantly around other ethnicities, or at least I felt like I was, and I think it was important to so it was we had a long discussion of if she should be Asian or not. And I felt like to tie into the whole story, I wanted a bigger worldview. That's why I made her non-Asian and Mexican.
Mercedes Wood asks, "Very impressive and professional story. How long did it take to plan and film?"
We started planning, I think, early February 2018. And then we ended up shooting it in July. So about 5 months, but it was 24/7, and we had a very committed team to make it happen. And we shot, I think, six days and a couple of pickups.
That's a pretty intense shooting schedule, 6 days. What do you hope audiences take away from the film? And do you have any message you think you'd like to get across to them?
Okay, I'm back.
You're back.
Okay. I think with this, it was more of is catching ourselves to see if we are casting judgment on certain people and their actions. I really wanted people to be able, or an audience to understand what brings someone to anger, whether if it is anger out of love, and kind of seeing that pan out. I wanted people to be able to also understand that right and wrong is kind of it's always complicated because I think in our Western society, it's very much 100% you're innocent or you're 100% guilty. Whereas I think in a more Eastern, or, where my family is from, so in this case, Dylan protecting them, is that wrong? Should he have gone to jail for that? And also, to see that this wasn't a racially motivated attack, but the way that the system responded to it was playing into racism, and it is oppressive.
Peter Klinkmiller asks, "If you were going to expand a story to a longer film, what do you think would you want to add to add to the existing story?"
I would add the perspective of Sean, the guy who ends up attacking the siblings. I would also give more background and more of the play out for Celine and for both of the siblings. They have much fuller worlds and stories into what just the two reality.
Can you go over that again?
Sorry.
It's all good.
Oh.
So I understand you are kind of working on a longer version of the film. Do you have how will audiences look forward to seeing that in the future?
With the pandemic, or wait, to see this film or to see a longer version?
Either one.
Oh, see this film, you can always email me. I think the contact info is here. If not, you can always go to my website and you'll find my contact and socials. For the longer version, I'm working on a couple of feature scripts right now, and everything's a little bit up in the air just because we're still in a and yeah, I don't know. I'd say the next upcoming years.
Well, look forward to seeing your future work. I think we'll continue to the next filmmaker and next interview. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. For this next Q&A, we're going to be joined by the co-director and co-producer of Ghost Mountain, James Taing. James, could you go ahead and start us off by introducing yourself and letting us know where you're calling in from?
Hey, thanks. My name's James Taing. I'm here in Milford, Connecticut, which is very close to Yale University. I'm not a homegrown filmmaker. This was my first film. I started off in finance, and that's sort of my trade, and it is a big passion in my life. This was a story that I felt was very important to tell, and I did leave my job to do this full time and finally tell the story, which I've been able to share with you guys. One thing I'd like to say also is that I'm very thankful for you all to watch this and for Houston to hosting us. And I know this is a very heart-wrenching and heavy topic on top of sort of the climate we live in now. And I hope that out of this, and this is one of the reasons why I want to do this story, is that in sort of tragedy, you can find triumph in the human spirit. And that was sort of what comment my cameraman came back with me with when this crisis had happened. And he was like, if your father could go through that horrific thing, the things that's happening to us, people are going through some trouble now. It's not something to underlook, but you can get through it. And it's certainly something you can overcome. And so I hope to leave with that hopeful message at the top of this.
Thank you for opening with that, and not just for joining us for this discussion, but also for sharing this necessary but disregarded part of our history, even if it is so heavy and even if it is on top of this really heavy climate right now. And I'm wondering if I could start with that, with sharing the story, because in the film we learned that there was no public outcry when there was mass displacement from Cambodia, from Thailand. And even today, when your father returns to Cambodia and asks young Cambodians if they've ever heard of the tragedy at Krabi here, 9 out of 10 of those young Cambodians haven't heard of it. So I'm wondering, why you think this is so absent from our history and from our remembrance, even though it's so necessary.
Yeah, that's a firepower question. And there's different ways to answer it. I think you're talking about that time period, the outcry, and then present day. And I'll focus on that time period. Mostly, why in 1979 was there not more publicity about this? And for the most part, it was really war fatigue during the Vietnam War. And people were just tired about it. I think Larry Clinton has spoken about it. Nobody wanted to hear anything about what was happening from our involvement overseas and how that spilled in and caused all this collateral damage out elsewhere. So that was one of the difficult things, is a retreat from that time period. I do think, though, that this country has done a very good job of producing film about the Vietnam War and also the killing fields and the aftermath, some of the other wars that took place You have the Killing Field movie in 1984, and then you have a series of books and documentaries devoted. This used to be a topic that everybody knew about after 1984. It just, during that time period, it wasn't a big thing. You do see, though, that things would turn around, and the perception around this and the attention was changed when Rosalind Carter went there around, I'd say, September 1979. So there is sort of this thing where it does take a major figure, and this would be the president's wife, to really drum up recognition. When you talk about today and you talk about why this particular incident, Pravi here, and the refugees being displaced there, and this horrible thing and this untold story, it's much part to the immigrants who come to this country. A lot of them, like my father, don't want to tell the story. They kind of want to move on. It's so traumatizing at one hand. And the other hand is that when they came to this country, they spent a lot of time just thinking about, how to learn the language, integrating in America, setting up business. So they haven't had time to really reflect on this since coming here. In terms of public policy in this country, and like, why hasn't the government talked about this and all that? I think refugee stories and refugee crisis always highlight foreign policy failure for any type of administration. And this was definitely, and it's something they don't want to revisit because it looks upon the failures of policy that didn't work out well. And refugees are always a casualty of that, or a symptom of that.
Governments don't want to revisit it, and as you said, your father didn't want to revisit it either because it's his personal tragedy. And in the film's opening, you actually say that your father didn't want to tell his story for a really long time because he didn't want to relive it. And I'm wondering how you finally convinced him to tell that story.
Yeah, there's a lot of persistence, and every day I just would ask him about his story and what he lived through, and it would just nag him. And I went as far as to go and bring up like other people in history who told their stories and how it made a difference. Like, one person who I really hold up to is Elie Wiesel, and his book Night has really impacted me. And I would show him like, these people told a story and people really cared. And day after day, and then it slowly got to tell some and a little more. And at that point, I think I had enough skin in the game where we could do the rest of it. It took a long time, though.
And what was the difference you were hoping to make?
I think two parts is, again, I said at the top, I did want to tell a story that was really uplifting and helps people through difficult periods, and it can speak to the indomitable will of the human spirit to overcome whatever obstacles they face. And that's sort of the meaning left behind with all the Holocaust survivors and what they did from when the Jewish Holocaust happened, was that you have a life to live, and it's worth living on and caring. I also think this is an incredibly important story because there's a frustration I have about the damage done when we have wars overseas, and we seem to solve our problems with bullets and bombs. And this particular story shows a different light of how to solve our diplomatic issues, which is through aid and compassion. It touches on that somewhat with Lionel and some of those figures, and my father being able to integrate in America and meet some of these, like Bob DeVecchi. But that's sort of a tail end of what I hope people get out of this, is that there are other means to solve our issues broadly.
And in the process of making this film, you've had to bear witness to a lot of atrocity in your research and in your travels. And in the film itself, you see the really gruesome number of deaths on display as the human skulls in the Genocide Museum. What was this process like? And has this experience of bearing witness to so much atrocity, has that changed you or shifted some perspective in you?
You're asking about me seeing these these remnants personally, these remains, right? And I think when you first see it, it hits home, right? It's sort of like what your family's been through coming to real life. And at some level, you see it so much, you get numb to it. I do know, and I can speak for myself and my family, we know our family growing up went through the Killing Fields, and we knew it was bad. And we had the benefit of watching the Killing Fields movie, which is many people haven't seen, but one of the iconic scenes is the actor there swimming through a pile of corpses, and it was so shocking to the viewer in the 1980s. And so I kind of knew this is what was part of my family. To go there and see it was one thing, and to see it in real life, it hits you, and then you become numb to it. Your other part of your question was, how does it change you, right? Perspective. And I think every time I see those things, I do get frustrated as to this is really the aftermath of sort of intervention overseas and sort of responsibility on a lot of people, and crimes, some crimes that haven't, a lot of Khmer Rouge leaders and a lot of leaders, foreign leaders, haven't really been put on trial for the things that happened throughout there. But lastly, I also do feel a lot of hope, because a lot of people who go to these atrocity places, the museum, Till Slang, they're also in shock and awe, and it really affects them, moves them. So to see these monuments and display for other people gives me a lot of hope that these people who did lose their lives do carry a message further, and they do bear witness that to the others of how to correct for our past and how to avert so that these things shouldn't happen again. And I think that is really important, and it really stands with me.
I want to get to this audience question. Mercedes Woods asks, was it difficult to film the story since it was hard for your father to retell it? And was there anything that left an impact with you or your father actually going back to the mountain?
Yeah, it was very hard many times. I think, particularly for my father. I personally was very invested in this story, and became quite obsessed, actually, with everything about it. And I think I was willing to do anything so that the story was told. So any difficulty that came forward, I was willing to say that's just part of the process. It's worth going through for this. But for my father, revisiting his past and dredging up the demons of them was very hard, and taking up to the mountain. You can see it in the film where he is, that's all raw footage. And I think that resonates with so many people, him to go there. And he hasn't been there in 40 odd years. It's helped him on some ways to come to terms with what happens in the past. And there is some relief that he's able to tell it. And I'm very happy for him. I think I'm very pleased that this has allowed some bit of reconciliation and closure for him and in this atrocity.
I want to pivot a little bit and ask this question for you and also Angela. So the census is actually a big supporter of Happy Fest. So even though these are uncertain times, it's important to remember that 2020 is a census year and an election year. So it's a crucial time to make a difference. So as a volunteer with OCA Greater Houston, we're working as community advocates to empower individuals to register to vote and fill out the census. So my question is, why is it important, even during lockdown, to do our due diligence?
Every action more than ever. Action is more so very close lines and how.
Sorry, Angela, you're sounding a little bit robotic. Maybe James first, and then come back to your response.
The importance of the census.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great things that come out of the census. A lot of population data, demographics that really help us to understand where we are as a country, whether it's from economics, health, and age. We're a country that is in great change now, right? There is a baby boomer generation that's getting older and retiring. There's a millennial generation that is trying really hard to take leadership, and a Gen Z. And so doing this census really helps to give light to what we're all, and information for all of us to really use and to make better informed decisions as a whole as a country. So I hope you guys all can do your census survey. I did mine.
Angela, is there anything you want to add on to that?
Sorry. What,
sorry.
it froze a little bit. What did you say?
Is there anything you want to add on regarding the importance of doing our due diligence with the census and voting?
It's really important for us to be able to make sure we're counted and everyone matters and we're accounted for in terms of how people are able to include you in the budget and include your voice, and to recognize that we are a population that exists outside of just purely numbers. So as soon as we're able to be counted, we can be seen and we can really use our voice.
And I think Kevin has a couple of last questions for both of you guys as well. But to close out on my end, do you guys have any other future projects that we can be on the lookout for? And where can we see that?
I have a couple of come out in a month or so, be out on YouTube. I can't really talk too much about it, but I'm sure I'll post about it in a month or two.
I'm not actively working on a project at the moment. I have some ideas, but for the most part, I want to just sit on this film and write it out and just take a breath and enjoy the ride.
All right, that concludes today's Q&A. Thank you both of you guys for spending your time to talk to us about your films. Please follow them, James Taing, Angela Chen, on their social media and websites. Check out their work. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd like to invite you all to our next block of films titled Reflected Vision, Showing One's True Self. We'll begin our next live stream tomorrow. Go to happyfest.com for the full schedule. Before we end, I'd like to bring attention to the current racial injustices that our Black communities are facing. We as AAPI are standing in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, so please visit tinyurl.com/BLMAAPI to learn concrete Houston-specific ways to be involved. We'll also be conducting a special panel next week to discuss the current climate and ways we can engage and best implement our calls to action. Stay tuned for more details. That completes our 6th day of films. On behalf of OCA Greater Houston, thank you for joining us at Happy Fest, and have a good evening.
We would like to acknowledge the grief and outrage right now, especially within our Black communities. Our city, Houston, continues to hurt. George Floyd was a native Houstonian, and according to the Houston Chronicle, we have had 6 police killings this past month alone.
As Asian Americans, we have to acknowledge and interrogate our own anti-Blackness and relative privilege within American society. We have to actively unlearn our own biases. It was Black activists who pushed against racist naturalization laws and supported Asian Americans after the racist murder of Vincent Chen.
Black activists stepping into action have benefited our community in profound ways. We must move beyond being a bystander and join the larger movement of Black Lives Matter. Join us in donating, protesting, petitioning, educating ourselves, and supporting our Black brothers and sisters in whatever way we can. Visit tinyurl.com/BLMAAPI, all caps, for more detailed ways to help, including Houston-specific bail funds, scripts to call local representatives, and translated letters to our family members, all of which you can join us in doing in between screenings. On behalf of OCA Greater Houston and the Happy Fest Committee, thank you for joining us on this broadcast.